Today I have with me one of my very dear friends and a fellow alum from ISB class of 2013, Madhur Chadha. Madhur, thank you for joining us and sharing your journey with us today. Why don't you start with your introduction?
Hi, all. Thanks, Manan. Yeah, as Manan already introduced, I'm a ISB 2013 alum. Currently, I'm working with Google as a product manager. Before Google, I was working for Uber. Before Uber, I worked a bit with a startup called Flock by Direct I founders, and also with Microsoft. Um, and I've also worked a little bit in consulting, in tech consulting with Cognizant, and spent the largest, spent about 6 years pre-MBA as a software developer with Infosys. So that's my career journey in a nutshell.
Thanks, Madhur. So, with almost 6 years at Infosys, why did you decide to go for an MBA?
Uh, okay, so I'm not somebody who has a very, very clear idea of a long-term kind of a thing. Like, okay, at 35, I should be this. At 40, I should be this. At 45, I should be this. But I had a general direction of where I wanted to be and things that I like to do and things I didn't like to do. So one of the things that I wanted to do was get into tech consulting. Tech consulting was my game because I was in tech. A lot of people I looked up. Again, a lot of your career choices are also a function of people you look up to, right? People you who surround you in the areas that you currently work in. So the people I looked up to were mostly tech consultants. My boss then was also a tech consultant, and while discussing with them and talking to them, one of the things that I realized, like, hey, tech consulting is something, MBA is something that can actually help me with a lot of like getting into from like a pure dev to consulting, and it will give me some of the tools necessary to become a good consultant. And on top of that, at some point of time, almost everyone has it in their back of the mind to start something. Not everybody takes a plunge, but it just felt that, hey, MBA could be something that would be interesting because I had a lot of other interests. I used to run a bunch of websites. I had a travel blog, my personal blog, YouTube, worked in a radio. So like so many other things that I was doing. Like maybe at some point of time, I want to start something in that domain, something around creative domains or something. I was tinkering with an idea of collaborative book writing or something. Again, a lot of these things, as you grow, you realize that some of them are not that great ideas. But looking at all the stuff, I felt an MBA would be a good bet. The short-term bet was to get into MBA and get into a more consulting side of things, tech consulting.
Thanks. So, how did you prepare for your applications and interview, considering it's 8 years ago? If you can remember and tell the viewers something about that.
Yeah, thanks for making me feel old. But yeah, it's been a while. The way I did was there were a couple of people I respected and I liked senior in the industry. And there was also a friend of mine who was working in ISB. So he was also a very good sounding board. So we spent a lot of time. Basically, I spent more time actually reflecting on, why do I want to do an MBA at all? We even tested like, hey, what if I don't do an MBA? What are the other paths that are available to me? Speaking to a lot of other people who had done MBAs from top colleges to understand, and also looking at their career journeys. And on top of that, also looking at, hey, do I even fit the ISB type of like college? Like, do I have the chops? Again, that's very subjective, so nobody knows. So that's how I did. I wrote most of the essays myself. Then I got the senior person who was in the industry to kind of look at them and give me feedback on, does it make sense? Does it make sense that A, do my essays make sense? And B, does it make sense for me to even do an MBA? So after I was convinced that it was the right thing to do, and this is something that I want to invest in, and it was expensive, right? Like MBAs are super expensive. I was fairly clear that I would want to do that. Just to be clear, like I was always sure I wanted to do an MBA for a very long time. It was like every engineer wants to do an MBA. It's like the standard of but many people do MBA because they are unhappy with their job. I was actually really happy with my job. I was doing well as a software engineer, and I actually enjoyed my work a lot. And thankfully, my company actually gave me a lot of flexibility in terms of like it was almost like, hey, I was sitting in US, so earning in dollars. I had an option to continue doing that. I had an option to move to any other country if I wanted to. Whenever I wanted to come back to India, like, hey, I want to go back, they would let me go back. So it was not that I was struggling with my career or I was unhappy with my career. I was one of the people who actually chose to be a computer science engineer. Like I was an electronics engineer. I chose to be a software engineer, and I was doing well and I was happy with it. So even though MBA was always in your back of your mind, but that was the time when I decided like, hey, does it still make sense for me or not? Because it's been 5-6 years, like 5 years. It's not an easy decision to leave everything and just jump in and do an MBA. So that's how I prepared. Essays and all, I didn't have to do too much because, as I said, like after you've done the thought process, the main thing was if you look at the essay and then you start thinking what I have to write, you've already lost the game. The idea is that if you've already spent enough time in figuring out why you want to do an MBA, then it's just a matter of putting your thoughts into the paper, and then maybe somebody else comes in and helps you just polish it a little bit, fitting that into that 300, I don't know the word limits now, I think it was 300 words at that point of time. It was more of a question of how do I fit it in 300 words rather than a question like, hey, what do I write? What do I write was always there. It was a question of like, what is the simplest and the easiest way to write so that I can communicate what I'm doing to the admission committee. So that's how I prepared.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it always helps to have another person and provide a perspective in terms of what you've written, and obviously deciding about your goals, whether they make sense or not, whether an MBA makes sense or not. So you wanted to get into tech consulting before MBA, and eventually right now you're in product management. So
Yes.
how has your experience at ISB impacted your career so far and the career choices that you've made?
Okay, I think this needs a little bit more backstory in terms of like how I ended up in product management also. So first, before joining ISB, I wanted to get into tech consulting. And as I said, like I don't have exactly like, hey, this is like I don't tunnel down into one single thing. I'm fairly open to different kinds of experiences and different kind of things. So when I joined MBA, I absolutely fell in love with a lot of these things around marketing, for example, right? I'm actually a majors in marketing and strategy and leadership, the dual majors that I've done at ISB. So I was trying to get in. I decided like, hey, maybe I want to get into sales and marketing before I get into consulting, or like they're similar. Consulting has a lot of elements of sales and marketing. But unfortunately, even though I tried really, really hard, I got no shortlists, like absolutely none. The only shortlist I think I got, so we were going to Mohali, if you remember. So the first day one was in Mohali. Yes. I was in Hyderabad. So all of us flew to Mohali.
Yes.
I was on the list, on the no-fly list. Basically, I was not the one who was flying because I had no interviews. Just, I think a night before, they said like, hey, Madhur, there's a company, LinkedIn wants to interview you. So for some sales role, and I was like, yes, this is my moment. And the first interview was creativity round. I went there and they rejected me in the creativity round and I was out. So nothing to do. So I tried, I exhausted all my applications on all kinds of marketing roles, sales roles, very, very junior roles. For example, I think there was a company that came for leadership roles, and they had this thing called you can only apply if you have less than 3 years of experience. They have these things in ISB, right? Like, we don't want experienced folks. I had 5. I wrote to them like, hey, I know you're looking for 3. I assume that you're looking for 3 because you expect that people with a lot of experience will expect more compensation or blah, 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 or be very set in their ways. I want to assure you that I will start from the bottom. I basically told them, hey, dude, pay me anything. Just give me a chance to interview. I don't care about the money. Unfortunately, that team also did not interview me. So it's a weird time for me. Then I realized like, hey, maybe I'll just go back to tech consulting. Cognizant came. I liked their role. They were offering media and entertainment, and I loved the role. And I was like, okay, media and entertainment, tech consulting. I'm getting everything I want. And I Hyderabad, like I love the city, I love the field, and this is exactly why I came. So I like, okay, let me go back to that path. Soon after joining, this is the most. So this was like I realized I hated tech consulting. Looking at it from a far away is more like what happened, dude? Like what did I do? I was not enjoying tech consulting. It's not that I was bad at it. It was not that it was very boring or anything. It was just like there was this sense of a gap that I was not able to fulfill. In a sense, like tech consulting is more like you go in, you figure out what the problem is, you figure out the solution, what kind of tech solutions that can be there, and you out, and you hand it over to somebody else to actually do it. In Cognizant's case, it will be like maybe a Cognizant team, or they can go to anyone. I was not able to pinpoint what I was not liking, but one of the things I realized later in life is mainly because, hey, I was not part of the solution. I was giving the solution, but then I was moving on, and I wanted to. All my life, I had been trained to basically be responsible for my own code, right? So if there was a bug in production, it could be traced back directly to me, my code. Whereas suddenly, it was like I was already out in some other project. So it's not something I was enjoying, and I was figuring out what to do next. Product management as a field was not really well defined when we were coming out. Many companies didn't have it, and I didn't even understand it fully, to be very, very frank. So I was figuring out what to do. For some weird reason, I was thinking maybe if I went into pure strategy consulting, that might be better for me. And in hindsight, that sounds so stupid because the technology was not the problem. Technology was something I was good at. I
Consulting
was just
was.
not consulting at that point. Like I wouldn't say that I would never be a consultant. Like I actually grew up thinking I want to be a consultant, but it just was. I was not enjoying that piece of the puzzle where I was just moving on, right? So I wanted to stay long. Then Microsoft called, like this new role, do you want to join? I'm like, yes, hell yeah, let's interview, see what it is. Turned out it was product manager, like they called it program manager, and they said product manager role. I interviewed, cleared. I still don't know why, uh, and and yeah, I joined and I realized like, okay, this is exactly what I want to do. It has marketing, it has sales, it has BD, it also had flavors of legal, and it has like you are responsible for what you suggest a product, you write the requirement, and then you build it. There's a team that builds it, and then you are responsible for taking it to the market, seeing its success, failure. Basically, you live by the product, die by the product. So yeah, that's how I went into product management, and I would say I was an accidental product manager, and I stuck to it. Like, okay, this is it. This is where I'll stick, and I've stuck to it since then. Maybe I'll maybe in sometime in future I would want to be a product management consultant. Maybe bring back the consulting angle that I always wanted to. So how your question was around how ISB has helped. One, of course, like I think ISB helped open a lot of doors for me. In a sense, like I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have got an interview with Microsoft at that point of time if I didn't have an MBA. From ISB specifically, because I asked them like, hey, why? Like they told like this. They're looking at LinkedIn, and these are the kind of profiles they do a reach out to if they have not applied. So of course that really helped. Second, alumni network has also helped. Like basically, I could call somebody in Microsoft like, hey, what this role is about, because there was our own batchmates were there, right? So I could call them up, hey, this is this role I'm interviewing for. Tell me something about it. Like, tell me what the role entails. Is it to basically evaluate it is for me? Like, I was in an existential crisis, right? Like, I just plonked in like every bit of saving I had to do MBA, and I realized that I didn't enjoy what I was doing. Going back to software development was anyway not an option. It's not that high thing. I was like, Infosys doesn't really pay that much, right? So I was in a conundrum at that point of time. So I could talk to people, I could get that. And yeah, I think one of the things that overall that has helped is that it opened up so many doors. Now entering those doors or not entering those doors is completely up to you, but at least it opened up those doors. I had a foot in the door and I could pass through.
Great. Thank you. And since then, the product manager role itself has evolved a lot. It is
Yeah.
the in thing for anybody who's currently in a software role, wants to move to a
Yes.
product role. And majority of the folks who we are working with are looking for product management as a goal post MBA. Now, here's a well
Yeah.
debated question. Do you think an MBA from a top B school is necessary for a successful PM career?
So, so one of the it's actually a very interesting thing that's happening. Like people want like starting very early to become product manager. Like we were not that when we started out. We were not that good. We barely knew what product management was. Like at least I barely knew what product management was. So it's a good thing that people are planning ahead. Is MBA necessary? Absolutely not. I mean, most of the many great product managers are not even MBAs, right? And even if you pick up any random, like go to LinkedIn and say, like, hey, look at product managers in any company, many of them are not MBAs. Many of them are ex-developers, some with MBA, some without MBA. Does MBA help? I know there's different schools of thought. I do believe that, like, I'll keep like MBA as a qualification is not necessary to be a product manager almost anywhere. Maybe some companies try to put it, but I don't think that's the right way of doing it. You are missing out on a much larger piece of the pie. But we have to talk about like what a role of product manager is. The role of a product manager is actually the center of, again, that's a very debatable question. It's also still not very mature in India. It's much better now, like thanks to companies like Flipkarts and of India and Amazon also, for example, and of course Google is now has expanded, Uber has expanded in India, Microsoft has been such huge, but these true blue Indian companies that have come up, so they have also generated a lot of great product managers that are there in the market, right? So product management as a vertical has started becoming much more mature, where you're not just project managers. Like earlier, many were project managers and people call them product managers. It's not the case. Product managers are like very different from project managers. Many product managers, including me, suck at project management actually. So like we are actually bad. If I was a project manager, I would be fired. That bad. So basically, the role of product management is actually a very, let's say, like very cross team. In a sense, I am in every single company that I've worked with. I have very closely worked with sales. I have actually done sales. Like I've gone to pitch meetings. I've gone to when I was. We have also set up stalls, right? I mean, when we were doing when I was working with the startup, we have set up stalls where people come out of conference and I'll be the guy in that green t-shirt, like, hey, do you want to talk to us for 2 minutes? So we have done all of that. You're part of sales, you're part of marketing, you're part of legal, you're part of any cross-team collaboration that is necessary, cross-team prioritization that is necessary, and you are basically taking calls on what to build. Now, and even legal and taxation depends on the kind of nature of the product. You're talking to taxation, you're talking to legal, you're talking pricing teams, and there's tons of complexity that is involved. At least when I look back, knowing all these subjects, having a flavor of this subject really helps. Not saying that you can't learn it on the job. Of course, everyone can learn everything on the job. But at least in my case, I do feel that things that I learned, of course, I don't use all of them. I barely use the exact formula steps that we learned. But MBA, like engineering or anything, is not about just taking the same concepts and applying. Nobody does that. That's a very bad way of looking at education. Education is a way of thinking. I believe that learning and reading about these things, especially from the best teachers, I think that was the most important thing, because they were I was not the top student at ISB anyways, right? I'm not a Dean's Listers also, right? So they were not trying to help us get good marks, right? None of the teachers were. They controlled, they could give us whatever grades they wanted, right? At the end of the day. What they were trying to do is to challenge our thought process, to help us think in a certain way. And to make us think in a certain way, they had their own methodologies, papers, tests, and other things, right? But I believe that whatever I learned there does help me in my day-to-day thinking about stuff, because I can, when we have a conversation with the marketing team or a BD team or a sales team or even a legal team, I at least have a perspective from their side. It makes you, in some sense, it's a little bit more, you become a little bit more empathetic to what their POV is, what their point of view is, because otherwise, like I have seen drastic changes in the way I also think, right? When I was a developer, when I started, there was a one way I thought. Then I moved on site. I became a business analyst kind of a thing. And I realized, oh, this is different. There's a lot more that I was never thinking about. It's not complicated, it's common sense, but you don't know many of these things unless you have seen them. And then after post MBA, there are a lot of other things that probably I would not have even, it would have taken me a while to understand. At least in my case, I believe that MBA did open gates for me. And specifically ISB MBA actually opened a lot of gates for me. And B, the education per se, like I'm actually stressing on that, like the education does help me in my day-to-day career. Is it necessary to be a good PM? No, absolutely not. Is it mandatory to have an MBA? No, absolutely not. You won't even see it as part of like required degrees in most good companies. They won't insist on having an MBA, but the knowledge of MBA, the subjects that they teach, is kind of helpful, and it has helped me also switch context from B2B to B2C to a couple of other areas, and I'm fairly confident I can go to even different, like from consumer tech, I could potentially go to any other kind of technology company as well, because it'll be easy for me to grasp because some of the fundamentals that you already know, right? I took business law. Yeah. Just a simple subject, but at least it's, understand a little bit of law, a little bit of, you have the taste to get started. You are no longer afraid of it. I can open up a balance sheet and read through it. I forgot half of it, but I understand the most important things. I know that a lot of things, like I know that I'm supposed to, I ignore anything that any financial analyst says. So those are the kind of things. It's just a way of thinking. And that's how it helped me in my PM career. And so that's where we are.
Yeah. No, I think totally agree with you. It's not a qualifying criteria for sure for a PM role, but it does help to talk the same language as the departments that you're dealing with. And also it gives you the confidence to venture into an uncharted territory and understand the value drivers and then add value later on, right? Finally,
everything can be learned. Just like everything can be learned on your own. There is nothing stopping you. It's just that the way I believe ISB is like, hey, I could read 10 books. I mean, this is an example I've given people, right? I could read 10 books and know about stuff, or I can get the authors of those 10 books to come and teach me about those 10 books, right? So, and I can have a discussion with that. So in some sense, for me, an MBA was a premium to talk to. Like that's happened, right? A lot of our professors were the authors of the books that they were teaching us, right? So it was amazing. It's like somebody said, like, hey, we are learning this concept in marketing. Okay, who's oh, by the way, this is the professor who's coming to teach. Oh, this name sounds familiar. Google, oh, he's the inventor of the concept. Yes. So when the inventor of the concept is coming to teach you the concept, you listen. And then you get a chance to ask them questions. So it's, for me, that was amazing, right? So that's what I value more. Forget the tags. Like, of course, tags help, but forget the tags, forget everything. It's just that it's a power-packed boot camp in some sense.
Yes. Great. Thank you so much, Madhur, for taking out time and talking to everybody here. And have a good rest of the day and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.